right?
I wish I invented them.
Okay, so can you tell me how you became involved with The Mechanic, and what was the draw of telling the story again in 2011?
Well, really, it was just a phone call from Irwin Winkler, and it was more about Irwin Winkler calling me and saying, "I'd like you to do a movie with me." And it was then it was about It's a Mechanic, because he's an iconic film producer who's made some of my favourite movies I grew up with. So, I've worked with Jerry Bruckheimer and Mace Neufeld, and they've all made these classic movies, and so it's the most fun to work with those guys. You just get knowledge of them, just anecdotes from what was it like on Rocky, what was it like on The Right Stuff. Give me some anecdotes, and then it was a side issue was The Mechanic in a way, and he gave me the script, and I hadn't realised that they'd been developing it for so long, and so they sent me the original '72, and I'd never read any of the other incarnations, and but this was very late. This was like 2 months before shooting, and so it was like, oh my god, we got to redo this. And so I got Richard Wenkin to write, and he had 8 weeks to bang it out, and we were constantly going backwards and forwards. And how do we kill someone like this? How do we kill someone like that? And but of course, he's got to get away with it and make it look like an accident. So it can't just be shooting people. It's got to be inventive.
Right.
So it was a pretty hectic, compressed schedule. But I actually like that because I think sometimes the more time you have to produce something, it's the more time you take to produce something.
Gotcha.
It takes all the second guessing out.
Mm-hmm. What was it like working with kind of the old school and the new school of Hollywood with like the different generations of Donald Sutherland and Ben Foster?
Great. I mean, because the thing I've learned when I've got to work with, same when I worked with John Voight on Tomb Raider and now Donald Sutherland, is they never really grow up. So you're not, you think they're going to be these very, sedate older gentleman actors, but they're not. They're just big kids. They're just as badly behaved as Ben Foster, and everyone's pretty much the same age in filmmaking. Everyone's sort of about 14 years old.
Yeah,
no matter how old they are physically.
That was actually my next question. Was like in a film like this, it's so very serious. What was the tone like on the set? Is everybody
the opposite? I mean, people are always amazed like how fun people are in serious, tough guy action movies. We just, we're not like that as well. It's all laughing and joking, and you can get people to be serious just long enough for the take. But when it's all edited together, we all look very serious and responsible. But shooting it, that's why they're sort of fun and a guilty pleasure to make, because you are just kids in the sandbox with toy cars and planes, and we're setting fire to things and crashing cars and shooting and playing cowboys and Indians, but with a very serious face on it.
Cool. So you directed Angelina Jolie, obviously, in the first Tomb Raider movie, and now Jason Statham. What are the differences, if any, between directing like a female and a male action star?
Funny enough, not very much with Angelina, because she was very similar to Jason, totally committed, wanted to do all her stunts, incredibly physically competent, so, often better than the stunt people, and so very similar. Obviously much more attractive to look at than Jason, although he does have a really good close-up. It's like his close-up is like the best close-up I've seen. It's like Bronson mixed with Robert De Niro mixed with Steve McQueen, Paul Newman. I could see everything in there. Every time he put the close-up on his face, like, whoa.
He's got one of the best pissed off looks in the industry, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you could just always see that close-up. So, very similar in attitude and professionalism and workaholic and striving for perfection, even at the cost of their own physical safety,
right.
but very different visually.
Cool. I read, and you don't have to correct me if I'm wrong here, I read that you directed the music video for Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. Is that right?
No, that's a weird... there's another Simon West, and for years IMDb merged... He was an actor in the 60s, a child actor.
Okay.
And went on to direct, I think, and IMDb at one point merged our resumes.
Okay.
And so for years people were saying, you started as acting. I said, no, I've never acted. And I finally got IMDb to separate our resumes.
Excellent.
But that's just an urban myth.
Okay, good stuff. I know you've been getting involved with The Cape for NBC. You directed the pilot for that. But what about film? Are you still involved with Protection with Dwayne Johnson? What's the status on that?
Yeah, well, Richard, who wrote this one, is writing that at the moment. So that's probably going to be after my next one. We're doing one with Nick Cage now.
Medallion, is that
Medallion.
Right? Okay,
and so they've been shuffling backwards and ordered like which one's going to be ready first.
Right.
And I think it's finally turned out that Medallion's going to be ready first.
Okay, cool. What about your thoughts on 3D and like film versus digital? What are your kind of personal?
I really like 3D. I'm producing a 3D movie at the moment. It's Night of the Living Dead Origins, which is being directed by Zeb DeSoto, but I'm producing it. And then I'm going to be doing a 3D CGI film, a war film, somewhere down the line. Maybe it'll be next year.
What's the name of that one?
It's called Thunder Run.
Okay.
And it's based on a book that's being rewritten by Ken Nolan, who did Black Hawk Down, that I produced as well. And so I'm a big fan of 3D in certain things. I think what will happen is it'll be parallel. There'll be the certain dramas that won't be 3D, and then there'll be like great fun movies. And I think it's great also not just for fast action. I think it's great for fantasy, to go to other planets and things like that. And so I like 3D. I mean, digital versus film. I still shoot on film for movies. I've shot digital for TV, for the small screen, but I still shoot film for the big screen, just because I find it more reliable in terms of action, and you can throw it around. It's 100-year-old technology that is so robust that the punishment we put the cameras through, and I have a very nostalgia for it, and I don't know how long it's going to be around. So I'm going to try and shoot as many films on film until it's finally.
Do you really think it could go away?
I don't know. I hope not, and I hope it doesn't just become such a small art thing. It's or it becomes it's in this weird middle ground, because unfortunately the big guys who have unlimited resources, who could always argue that they've got enough money for film, are totally HD now, and so I don't know who's going to champion it, because the guys at the other end who are very cheap, it is cheaper when you've got no money and you're shooting very little, and you need one guy with a camera.
Right.
HD works, but it's this middle ground where I make movies where film is still better to me, because it's about the same cost as HD, but I like the look better, and I find the equipment more reliable and quick. But then in 5 years' time, HD will be a whole different thing, and I'm sure it'll be maybe as good as film. It'll be on a camera this size and cost $10. So
yeah.
I can see it going away.
Okay. How is the mechanic different from any of the other films that you've worked on, kind of in your own mind?
I think it was the reality restriction in some ways, because even when I did The General's Daughter, that was a real world situation. I shot it very much like a period costume drama, because it was because that's what I sort of grafted onto it, because it was set in the military, but it was a story of reputation and betrayal, and it wasn't about shooting and fighting and things like that. It almost didn't need to be in the army. You could have put it 100 years ago, as a period piece, because it was about inter-class relationships and covering up for the sake of honour, and so it was sort of almost coincidental that it was set in the military, and so it was a bit more to me like shooting Pride and Prejudice or something like that, because it was almost a costume drama. Everyone was in uniform, everyone behaved in this very stiff way. So in a way, it wasn't that reality based. It was very dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this, I tried to be very realistic, and on General's Daughter, I would deliberately shoot it in a very classical, restrained way. Mechanic, I would just what suited the scene. I wasn't going to do crazy handheld and like that, but it was not. Okay, we have to be very reverential to the scene here. It was more like what just tells the story, and what's real, and what's going to make people forget they're watching a film and make them just be in the story.
Right. Okay, so I have one more question. Did anything in particular surprise you about making this movie? Perhaps like a stunt that went smoother than expected, or any particular aspect that really kind of
They
took
never
you by
seem to
surprise?
get better than expected. I mean, I suppose it was a big relief when we blew the house up, because it's a real house that we weren't supposed to damage, and it's a real house that person lives in, and we had to line the living room with fireproof material and replace the glass, and we shot ice through it instead of glass, so that it would melt when it hit their lawn, so they didn't even get glass in their lawn.
Cool.
And every stick of wood in the balustrade had to be replaced with breakaway stick. And so I suppose the biggest relief was after we blew up that house, looking at it, it wasn't damaged, so that the guy could move back into it a week later. Because you never know whether you're going to take someone's house out with that if the effects guys have overcooked the pyro.
Right. Cool. All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.